I thought love was everything. I thought if I gave my heart, my time, my soul, it would be enough. But I was wrong. I lost the love I once craved, the one I thought I could never live without. And yet, in losing him, I found something far more valuable. This is my story. I was in my high school year when I first fell for him. I still remember those years of my one-sided love, innocent, hopeful, and blind. The sun was slipping lower into the horizon that winter afternoon, brushing the edges of the school playground in gold. I remember that day as clearly as if it were painted in my mind. I was standing at the far end of the basketball court, clutching my notebook, pretending to write something. In truth, I was watching him. Raghav. Tall, athletic, and with that easy smile that seemed to make the world tilt just a little. He was the captain of our school's basketball team and a year older than me. I had seen him around before, of course, at assemblies during annual functions. But that day, something changed. Maybe it was the way he laughed with his teammates, or the way the sunlight caught in his hair. Maybe it was the way he seemed so effortlessly belonging wherever he went. And me? I was just Arohi, the quiet girl who always stayed behind in the library, who never spoke too loudly in class, who hid behind her loose ponytail and books. I didn't expect him to notice me. And yet, when his eyes brushed over in my direction, just for a second, my heart jolted as if I'd been caught doing something forbidden. That night, lying on my bed, I replayed that glance over and over again. I told myself it meant nothing, but a small voice inside whispered, "What if it did?" A week later, I heard from a friend that Raghav had been accepted into a prestigious city college. I remember smiling quietly to myself. I didn't know it then, but that small smile was the start of everything. It was ridiculous, even to me, the thought that I could end up in the same college as him. My grades were average at best. My parents wanted me to go to a nearby local college, the kind where half the students lived just down the street. But when I saw the name of Raghav's college printed in the newspaper, something in me shifted. That evening, I sat at my desk and wrote it down in big letters. Get into Raghav's college. It wasn't just about him. I told myself it was about proving I could do something extraordinary, that I could set my eyes on something far away and actually reach it. But if I was being honest, deep down, I wanted to be near him. I started studying harder than I ever had. Late nights, early mornings, extra tuitions. My friends joked that I was turning into a scholar overnight. They didn't know that every formula I memorized, every essay I wrote, felt like a brick in a bridge that would lead me to him. The months blurred into a rhythm of exams, assignments, and whispered prayers. And then, one warm afternoon, the acceptance letter arrived. My hands shook as I opened it. I was in. The college was bigger, louder, and more intimidating than I'd imagined. The first week felt like walking into another world, groups of confident students laughing in corridors, seniors lounging on steps, the air buzzing with chatter. And then, on the third day, I saw him. Raghav was leaning against a wall outside the canteen, talking to a group of his friends. He was exactly as I remembered, relaxed, self-assured, smiling in a way that made people gravitate toward him. When he spotted me, his eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to place where he'd seen me before. "Arohi, right?" he said when I walked past, his voice carrying that easy warmth. I froze, a little surprised he remembered my name. Yes." He grinned. "You were in my school, weren't you? Always with the books. And now you've followed me here too." His friends laughed, and I felt heat creep into my cheeks. But his tone was playful, so I forced a smile. "Maybe I just like good colleges." "Right," he said, still smiling. "Welcome to the jungle, Junior." It's funny how life keeps moving for everyone else, yet for me, some moments stood still, like the exact way the late afternoon light spilled through the neem trees outside our college courtyard. Or how the crowd in the corridor was just noise until his voice drifted through it. Raghav. There were days when I didn't even need to look for him. My eyes found him on their own, A reflex my heart had learned without asking my permission. I'd be walking toward the library, clutching a pile of books, and there he'd be, leaning casually against the wall, talking to his friends. His laugh, deep, warm, a little too confident, cut through the air like it owned the space. And I would slow down. Just enough to let my eyes linger a second too long. I didn't talk to him much back then. I didn't have the courage. But I had my own way of being close to him, watching, learning, collecting small pieces of his world like they were treasure. I knew he preferred his tea strong with 2 spoonfuls of sugar because I once saw him stir it exactly 5 times before taking a sip. I knew he hated onions in sandwiches because I'd seen him carefully pick them out and set them aside. I knew he always wore his watch on his right wrist, even though most people wore it on the left. I noticed how he treated people, friendly with his basketball teammates, half polite with professors, teasing with juniors, and utterly charming when talking to strangers. He wasn't fake. He just had a way of adjusting his tone to fit the moment. I even started noticing patterns in his days. Mondays, he spent most of the lunch break in the library probably catching up on work. Tuesdays, basketball practice in the evening, without fail. Wednesdays, canteen with his friends after class. Fridays, he liked to hang out near the old banyan tree by the east gate before heading home. It sounds obsessive when I say it like this, but to me, it was preparation. I told myself that knowing him this well would help me talk to him one day, without sounding like a stranger. Sometimes I'd even change my routine, just to be where he was. If I saw him heading toward the canteen at 11:30, I'd suddenly remember I needed tea. If I spotted him entering the library, I'd find a seat 2 tables away, close enough to watch him run a hand through his hair while reading, far enough that I could pretend I was deep in my own notes. I became good at pretending. There were moments when he'd glance around, and our eyes would meet for a fraction of a second. My heart would skip, not because I thought it meant anything, but because being noticed, even accidentally, felt like a victory. I started dressing a little better. Nothing drastic, just brighter colors, tidier hair, a touch of lip balm. I wasn't trying to change who I was. I just wanted to be the kind of girl who could stand next to him without looking forgettable. But even on the days when I felt invisible, I never stopped looking at him. My eyes followed him, like the moon follows the tides. Quiet, constant, inevitable. And in those silent observations, I built an entire picture of him in my mind, a picture that felt so real, I forgot it was only mine. The thing about watching someone for so long is that eventually they watch back. It started with small things. A flicker of his gaze when I entered the canteen. The faintest twitch of a smile when I passed him in the corridor. At first, I told myself it was my imagination, wishful thinking, nothing more. But over time, I knew. Raghav had noticed. The first real confirmation came on a Wednesday afternoon. I had just stepped out of the library when I spotted him walking ahead with 3 of his friends, Arjun, Samir, and Dev. They were laughing about something, the easy kind of laughter that comes from years of knowing each other. I followed at a distance, not close enough to be obvious, but close enough that if they turned around, I couldn't exactly pretend I was going in the opposite direction. Then Arjun's voice floated back, loud and teasing. "So, Raghav, your little junior's here again." My steps faltered. Raghav didn't turn around. "Who?" "Arohi," Samir supplied, with a grin I could hear in his tone. "The one who's always around. Always looking at you like you're some Bollywood hero." The boys laughed, and I felt my face burn. Raghav chuckled too, but his words stung. "She's just a bookworm, yar. Probably doesn't even know how to have fun." I gripped my notebook tighter, telling myself it was just banter. Just his way of deflecting. But Arjun wasn't done. Bookworm or not, she's cute. The shift was subtle, but I saw it. Even from behind, I noticed the way Raghav's shoulders stiffened. His laugh came too quickly, too forced. "Cute? You've lost it. She's a total Bahenji." They burst into laughter again, moving ahead toward the canteen. I slowed my steps until they were out of sight. The words should have been enough to make me back off. They should have embarrassed me into keeping my distance. But instead, they made me curious. Why did he get uncomfortable when his friends called me cute? Why not just agree or brush it off casually like he did with everything else? It wasn't the last time it happened. One Friday, I was sitting in the canteen, pretending to read a magazine when I heard Dev say, "Raghav, seriously, that junior of yours, she's got this thing for you. And I think you like it." Raghav immediately shook his head.
Nah, man.
"She's just different. Not my type." "Different in a good way," Dev teased. "You always smile when she's around." For a split second, Raghav froze. Then he scoffed. "You guys have way too much free time. Focus on your assignments instead of playing Cupid." But I saw it again, the quick glance. He threw over his shoulder in my direction, the flicker of something he hid under a smirk.
It was then I realized.
It wasn't that he didn't notice me. It was that he didn't know what to do about it. The teasing from his friends became a regular thing. They'd nudge him when I walked by. They'd drop my name in random conversations. And every time, he'd either dismiss me with a sarcastic label, Bahenji, scholar, bookworm, or change the subject entirely. But there was one reaction he couldn't hide. The way his jaw tightened. Whenever someone else showed interest. One afternoon, we were all in the campus garden, when a guy from my class, Ritesh, came up to me with a smile. "Hey Arohi, can I borrow your economics notes?" "Sure," I said, handing them over. From the corner of my eye, I saw Raghav glance up from his phone, eyes narrowing briefly before he looked away. His friends noticed too. Arjun grinned and whispered something in his ear. Raghav rolled his eyes and muttered, "Shut up." That was the moment it clicked for me. He didn't want me, but he didn't want anyone else to have me either. And that knowledge gave me a strange kind of courage. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the sky hung heavy with gray clouds and the air smelled faintly of rain that hadn't arrived yet. Classes had just ended, and I was halfway to the college gate when I heard his voice behind me. "Arohi, wait." I stopped instantly. There was no mistaking that voice, confident, casual, and yet laced with something that made people pay attention without trying. I turned slowly. Raghav was walking toward me, hands in his pockets, his hair slightly ruffled from the wind. There was no smile on his face, but no frown either. Just that unreadable expression that made my stomach twist. "You like me, don't you?" he asked, straight to the point. I blinked, caught off guard. "What?" His eyes stayed on mine. "You heard me." For a second, the world went quiet. My mind was a blur of panic and relief. I could lie, pretend he was imagining it. But I was tired of pretending. So I nodded. Slowly, deliberately. A small, almost smug smile tugged at the corner of his lips. I knew it. My pulse quickened. "Then why are you asking?" "Because," he said, tilting his head, "I'm giving you permission." "Permission?" I repeated, confused. He took a step closer.
Yes.
"You can pursue me. Follow me around. Try to impress me. Let's see what you've got." I stared at him, trying to figure out if he was joking. But his tone was calm, almost serious, the way someone might say, "Go ahead. The game's on." Something about it made me smile despite myself. "And what happens if I succeed?" He shrugged. "We'll see." That was it. No promises, no grand declarations. Just an open door. But for me, it felt like the world had shifted. I decided to follow him without fear. From the very next day, I stopped hiding. If he was walking to class, I matched his pace. If he sat with his friends in the canteen, I joined them instead of hovering nearby. I waited for him after basketball practice, handed him bottles of water, laughed at his bad jokes, and sometimes even dared to tease him back. The first time his friends saw this new boldness, they reacted exactly as I expected. Shock, amusement, curiosity. "Wait, Arohi's actually with you now?" Arjun asked one afternoon when I slid into the empty seat beside Raghav at the cafe. "She's pursuing me," Raghav said casually, sipping his coffee. "Officially." "Pursuing?" Samir laughed. "Bro, what is this, a 90s Bollywood movie?" Raghav smirked. "Hey, I'm just letting her try. Who knows? She might even convince me." Their laughter was light, but I didn't mind. Because for the first time, I wasn't just the quiet girl watching from the sidelines, I was part of his orbit. After 6 months of yes, maybe no, I learned quickly that pursuing Raghav was like chasing sunlight through the trees. Sometimes it warmed you completely, and sometimes it slipped away just when you thought you'd caught it. Some days, he'd be unexpectedly kind, offering me his notes, walking me halfway home, buying me a cup of chai without me asking. On those days, I'd feel like I was winning. Other days, he'd be distant, teasing me in front of his friends more than usual, or leaving without saying goodbye. And on those days, I reminded myself that this was a challenge, not a guarantee. I made an effort to know his moods. I celebrated his wins after basketball matches, comforted him with silence when he seemed stressed, and remembered little details about his week, so I could bring them up in conversation. Once, when he had a big presentation, I waited outside his class with his favorite lemon soda. "How'd it go?" I asked when he emerged. He smirked. "You're starting to know me too well, scholar." "Maybe that's the point," I said, and his smirk softened just a little. I still remember the evening he said yes. It was late March, almost exactly 6 months since that Tuesday afternoon when he gave me permission. The sun was setting over the basketball court, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Practice had ended, and most of his teammates had already left. I was sitting on the bleachers, flipping through my notebook, when he walked over, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Still here?" he asked, dropping his bag beside me. "Where else would I be?" I replied, smiling. He sat down, elbows resting on his knees. For a moment, he just looked at the court, the fading light glinting in his eyes. Then he turned to me. "You know," he said slowly, "I didn't think you'd last this long." "Last what long?" "This pursuit thing." His lips curved faintly. "Most people would have given up after the first week." I met his gaze. "I'm not most people." Something flickered in his expression, something softer, almost unreadable. Then he leaned back, looking straight at me. "All right, scholar," he said. "You win." I blinked. What?" "I like you," he said simply. "So, yes." For a second, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the cinematic confession I'd dreamed of, no flowers, no music, no perfect words. But maybe that was why it felt real. I laughed, partly in relief, partly in disbelief. "You're serious?" He smiled. "Dead serious." And just like that, after months of chasing, the boy I'd watched from a distance was mine. I didn't know then that this yes would come with more shadows than light. That the games, the teasing, the unspoken rules would still linger between us. But in that moment, I didn't care. Because after all those days of hiding in the background, I had stepped into his world, and for the first time, he had let me stay. Over the next few weeks, I found myself bumping into him often, at the canteen, in the library, sometimes in the common area. He started calling me Scholar whenever we met, a nickname that made me half annoyed and half delighted. One Friday afternoon, he invited me to join his friends for coffee after class. I hesitated. They were all seniors, confident and loud, but he insisted. At the cafe, the teasing began almost immediately. "So, Arohi," one of his friends said, "how many books do you read a day?" 10, 20. Raghav chuckled. "She probably dreams in textbook chapters." I rolled my eyes, trying to play along. "Some people have talent for sports. I have talent for reading." They laughed, and for a moment, I felt like I was part of something, like I belonged. It became a pattern. Every time we hung out, Raghav would find some way to joke about me, my simple clothes, my quiet nature, the way I spoke. I told myself it was just his way of showing affection. I started making small changes. I began choosing brighter clothes, learning to join conversations instead of just listening. I wanted to be someone who could stand next to him without feeling like the background. But the more I tried, the more he found to tease me about. One day, after I nervously gave a presentation in class, he said in front of his friends, "Not bad, Scholar. You only looked like you were about to faint twice." They laughed. I laughed too, even though my cheeks burned. In my heart, I told myself this was just how couples or almost couples were. Playful teasing. Little jokes. That's what I thought it was.